improving the quality of basic education through the Escuela Nueva, which means new school, for the most vulnerable children and youth of low-income schools in the majority of developing countries has been my life project. I started it as a social, local innovation, gradually became a national policy at the end of the 80s, reaching more than 20,000 schools in Colombia. And it has, after the World Bank selected it as one of the 3 major innovations that had impacted national policies, we started getting many countries coming in. So we've been adapting it through governments to at least 14 countries in the region. I want to highlight 4 issues. First, yes, we can do it. We can improve quality basic education in developing countries in low-income schools, despite all the constraints. Second, a major constraint is our conventional teacher-centered model of education, because we have to handle diversity, and that's a major constraint. A third issue I want to highlight is that an innovation can become scalable. It can become a national policy. And fourth, beyond academics. It's not sufficient to work only in improving learning achievement. We also have to promote peaceful democratic behavior. Citizenship, what Dewey said 100 years ago, can be done in schools. So I just wanted to highlight those 4 things. Initially, we started as a local innovation, working with the rural schools, responding to inequality, to inequity, to inclusion. We started with the remote rural multi-grade schools, 1 teacher per classroom, to the little red house in the prairie. We started with that. But this was so beautiful. They're the marginal of society. And by the way, the shortfalls of EFA and Millennium Goals are in these schools, and they're invisible to most educational planners. So we started with these schools, and there were so many challenges: dropouts, repetitions, low teacher morale, irrelevance of learning, poor school-community relationship, ineffective teacher training. All the money goes into teacher training and nothing happens. So, it's like a failed company. Educational systems are like failed companies. So we had to tackle all these problems in a systemic way. And this forced us into cutting-edge pedagogics, collaborative and participatory learning, and especially in 21st century skills and entrepreneurship skills. So this moved us to go beyond rural education, and now we're in urban schools, migrant populations. So it's just the way of what we know works in education. I want to start right now, if I can do it right. Told me it's like a trigger. Billions are spent in education and nothing happens, and very little results, because everything has changed in society except the classroom. So this is a point I just wanted to highlight, because more of the same is not enough. So quality education is possible, and I like to start with this quote from Comenius in the 1600s. For more than 100 years, the lack of school management methods has been the cause of countless complaints. But it has been only in the last 30 years that efforts have been made to find a solution to this problem. And what has resulted? Schools continue exactly the same as before. So everything has changed. Am I doing it right? Should I focus right there? So I just wanted to share with you some pictures. This is not new. Developed countries know these things in good quality schools. The philosophy is new. It's not new. We use the same sound educational principles. We just put the inputs in a different way in the interaction. We mix the cocktail in the classroom, and this is why we've had results. So what do? We transform the conventional model of education and we go from frontal teacher-centered to child-centered. Nothing new. Montessori said this many years ago. But we start unlocking the skills of 21st century, learning to learn, learning to lead processes, take initiatives, learning how to synthesize information, collaborate, learning how to work in teams, how to work in groups, critical thinking, how to follow instructions, meet deadlines, criticize, accept criticism and not use force, test knowledge, using ICTs, and of course to take risks. This is the essence of creativity. So Escuela Nueva, we started with this, and we ended up unlocking the skills of entrepreneurship and 21st century skills. So what does Escuela Nueva promote? Child-centered, collaborative, active learning, nothing new. We know this theory. Different learning paces or rhythms in the classroom. This is very important. This is where the conventional system doesn't work, because now learning takes place in different ways. And not everybody has to learn the same thing at the same time. Different learning rhythms. Relevance, unless there's relevance, children are not motivated to learn. A new role of the teacher as a facilitator, a manager. The teachers spend more time not giving instructions and routinary instructions, but more time helping comprehension, motivating. It's a new role of the teacher. for the 21st century. Anything the child learns has to be applied to their family and community, so a close relationship between school and the community. Knowledge is applied. Interaction between teachers, parents, and children in a very concrete way, not so many PTA meetings. Children with leadership skills, parents involved in the learning process. Emphasis, this is very important, especially coming out of Colombia. I'll show you some good evidence at the end. Emphasis on democratic attitudes and participation. We learned participation and citizenship in schools. Student government elections, happy, healthy, confident students, and we had to sort of mix things in a different way. A new generation of self-paced, self-directed, reusable, because we had to think of cost effectiveness. Since we're starting to work in Africa and Timor-Leste right now in Vietnam and getting ready to work in Africa next year, we have to think of cost effectiveness. So it's better to work south-south. And learning takes place through dialogue and interaction. This is very key. Individual work, group work, working in pairs, learning corners that bring alive the activities of the learning guides, that strengthen cultural identity, inquiry skills in children. So we nurture a culture of peace and participation, learning to learn, empowerment, and their communities. It's systemic and cost-effective. We have very solid academic achievements proven, the World Bank, Stanford University, etc., but also social skills and handling pluralism and diversity in the classroom. This is key. Colombia was the only country, according to UNESCO, in the first international laboratory of comparing 11 countries, where rural schools perform better than urban schools. This is where Escuela Nueva was taking place. And this is just amazing that a rural school performs better than urban schools of small cities. Democratic behavior, this was done in Guatemala by Academy for Education Development, showing how in indigenous groups that children take turns, they lead processes, they give feedback. And in Colombia, published by the University of London, we did a study on peaceful interaction, the impact of Escuela Nueva on peaceful interaction of children. And coming out of Colombia is especially important. So yes, we can promote peace and democracy. And we've learned how to work with public-private partnerships. This went through governments, but we learned that governments are not sufficient. You need governments for coverage. You have to work with governments. But I ended up creating an NGO, Escuela Nueva Foundation in Colombia, because civil society has to take place. If I had not created the institution, we could not sustain the innovation. So quality and sustainability are key words that come from civil society and the private sector, and we need governments for coverage. So right now, I need help. Investors, we're getting in India, in Chiapas, in Mexico. I have some good partners in Mexico and Timor-Leste, and I need partners to start working next year in Africa. Thank you very much.